This whole book started about 10, 11 years ago. I got attacked on a commercial shoot. For me, that day is so important because it's not about the actual occurrence of what happened. It's more how the day in my mind has shifted and walked. And Memory Bank, it's a culmination of all these things happening behind the scenes that then hopefully make the image look like it just kind of happens.
You've worked with brands like Nike, Vogue, Google. What type of influence did it have on your personal work, if any?
It definitely has. It's more just being disciplined. Memory Bank in many ways, it created accountability, but also allowed myself this flexibility to create work that I felt was important to me.
I want to hear your thoughts on AI.
Depending on how you answer this, you might look incredibly silly.
Welcome to the Mood Podcast, uncovering the art of conversation through the lens of photography and creativity, one frame at a time. I'm your host, Matt Jacob, and today I am joined by South African photographer Kent Andreasen, an artist whose work drifts between the commercial and personal, between sharp precision and quiet introspection. His new book, Memory Bank, published by Witty Books, feels like this kind of visual mixtape, a decade-long reflection on memory, pain, and the strange comfort of forgetting. Through color, texture, and restraint, Kent explores the fragments of a life, the things we hold onto, and the ones that fade. In our conversation, we dive into his process of bookmaking and photography, the tension between trust and distrust inherent in photography, and how mental health and doubt can coexist with creative success. Kent opens up about this uneasy relationship between memory and photography, the pain and power of self-critique, and how mental health, travel, and creative isolation have really shaped his work. We talk about color and silence, about the way his distrust can fuel truth, and about building a book that feels like therapy disguised as art. This is Memory Bank, and this is Kent Andreasen on remembering, forgetting, and finding meaning in the space between. Enjoy. All right, Kent Andreasen, welcome to the Mood Podcast. I'm so happy to have you on here, and thanks for taking the time to speak with me.
Thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to getting your new book. Now, we're here mostly to kind of talk about your new book, Memory Bank, and to kind of dive into the whys, hows, and processes and philosophies behind it, as well as kind of my own interpretations. I don't have a physical copy of the book, but you kindly sent me the digital version, I guess, before this conversation. So I've really enjoyed spending time with it. Before we kind of jump into everything, what I thought would be good for us and the audience to listen to and to watch is just for me to read what you wrote as an outline for this book, if it's okay for you, because I think it provides such good context around the book, but also around you as a person. So if you don't mind, I'll just read that before we begin. Okay.
Go for it.
The idea of writing an outline for this book has caused me stress for a long time. If I had wanted to be a writer, it's something I would actively be doing and would probably be broke. Previously, I half-heartedly wrote a piece that I tried to cleverly explain the work I had made, which I now know falls flat. After all, this feels like a thought experiment in many ways. Nonetheless, here I am again as a result of a conversation I had with a friend of mine, Matthew Fremantle. He is a well-known South African poet and writer with a knack for seeing through my facade. I say this because I presented him with the dummy of this book to look over, and he called me for a meeting to discuss his findings. Up until this point, I had shown a few people the work, and most said they enjoyed it, but didn't seem to have really looked at it. And I mean really looked at it. I was really eager to hear what he said because I respect his opinion and knew he wouldn't hold back. We started chatting, and he revealed that the book had a certain darkness and pain that he wasn't expecting. And he was the second person who had said this. I found myself at a review in Montana a few weeks prior to this interaction, and Jenya Friedland expressed the same notion, that the book was laced with people in pain. And this got me thinking, maybe that is what this is about, my own internal struggle with myself and my attempt to resolve aspects of work through memory, my life in South Africa, and these frameworks that I create for myself. Matthew also said he doesn't normally advise artists to write about their own work, but knew that the work was so personal that there may not be someone equipped to pull back the veil. At the end of the day, each image makes sense to me and is more about figuring things out than making something cohesive. A trail of consciousness that comes at you like a fever dream and hopefully only lets up when you get to the end. I often didn't enjoy making this work because it felt so self-absorbed, but now that it's done, I see that it was necessary. Really super interesting. We're going to kind of break down some of that. I know it might be uncomfortable for you to listen to, but I think it was really an interesting excerpt that you sent me. And there's a few other things that I know you've said before about this work as well as your own. And something that did kind of reach out to me was, I think you said photography is a vessel that you use to come to terms with your own reality, which kind of backs up everything that I just read. Give me an insight as to kind of what that reality is that you're trying to come to terms with and where this book fits in with that.
Yeah, it's an interesting notion because I think living in South Africa, there's a strong tradition of photography that kind of paints a certain light. I think with South Africa's past and apartheid, there's a certain sort of documentary school of thinking in terms of the work that's being made out of here, which is incredibly interesting. But it's something that I think, because of my age, being born in 91, and sort of being at the back end of the sort of apartheid years, I never really experienced any of that. So I don't have that as a sort of a grounding point. And I think because I've been fortunate enough to travel so much and my work's taken me throughout Africa and overseas, I've kind of always looked outwardly towards like European and American photographers and then applied those ethos to my own work back in South Africa. So I think for me, the way that like my work is shaped by something that isn't South African. So yeah, it's a tough thing to also be a white South African photographer, a male white South African photographer, and finding your sort of niche and your place, with what also not like treading on other people's toes and the complexities of South African politics makes it hard to kind of make work that feels meaningful but sort of honest to your own reality. And I think Memory Bank, in many ways, and the work that I made in that sort of body of work, is it kind of created sort of accountability, but also allowed myself like this flexibility to create work that I felt was important to me. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey in that regard. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, my reality, I guess my reality is complex because I went to an incredible school. I was come from a middle class family, upper middle class. Yeah, I've had a very good upbringing. So finding sort of the stories that you want to tell and the narratives that you want to kind of bring to light is something that takes a lot of thought, because you can be quickly found out to be quite dishonest and kind of surface level if you don't choose the right things. So yeah, that's kind of what Memory Bank a lot is about, is actually trying to figure that out. What are the stories that I actually want to tell about myself and then about the world that I kind of live in and the perceived world that I live in.
Okay, sorry to cut away and interrupt, but I did want to mention the current sponsor of the show. And it's not often we have sponsors on the Mood podcast, but I really did want to connect with this project and feature them as much as possible where I could. They are Strata Editions, which is an experimental photography project and store in Livingston, Montana in the US, whom I had the luxury to visit when I was passing through a while back on a photography project, and I was blown away. They are primarily a photobook store and exhibition gallery space, presenting collections of photobooks, photographic art, and furniture all designed in-house. By focusing on visual and material work through a thematic lens, they offer a space to consider the relationships between photography, self, environment, and production. The works they share tell stories about themselves as well as how they tell the stories that matter to them. Physically, Strata Edition serves as a reading room, workshop, and exhibition space for anyone who passes through its doors. Online, their e-commerce game in the photobook world is legit, and some of the books in their collections are not even readily available for purchase anywhere else. They're either sold out or out of print or imported. The titles they offer have been made available directly by the publishers or the artists themselves, and their hope is that you'll want to share these books with friends and family and add them to your own library, and I highly recommend you do. I have a few of my own favorite books from these guys. I love them. They offer artist exhibitions and shows consistently also throughout the year and continue in their own reflections on the relationship between people and environment in this region. So go check them out. They're great guys, excellent platform. Shoot them a follow. Use the discount code in the description to grab a 10% discount on your order. Do be mindful, though, they do only ship inside the US at this stage. All right, back to the episode. And so where did the self-absorption come? I mean, every photographer, I guess, battles with that because you're almost telling the world to look at you and, take note. This is me and my art, right? So there's always an element of that and a little bit of embarrassment, like, oh, where did the kind of, in that first thing that I read out, you said you almost didn't enjoy the work because it kind of felt self-absorbent. Why didn't you necessarily enjoy the work? And is it more of kind of a retrospective enjoyment now that it's complete?
Yeah, like I was saying earlier, I think there's a lot of sort of pressure, I think, in South Africa to be telling these very in-depth stories about the world that we surround in terms of poverty, the climate of South Africa in terms of its like social landscape. It feels like a lot of that work is the stuff that's also getting very seen and is in galleries and has the sort of full tradition, as it were. So to make a more sort of abstract body of work like this felt like I was kind of turning my back on that a bit. And it felt very close to like self-portraits in many ways, which personally, when I look at self-portraits, I kind of cringe. So yeah, it was like kind of figuring that out, but also like this constant worry, I think, that I have of people understanding the work. And that's kind of what that write-up kind of tries to get across, is that it makes sense to me and it's meant to feel like almost a fever dream. Whether it makes sense to other people, like only time will tell when the book comes out and people kind of page through it. But it all kind of pieces together in a way that I feel is very cohesive. But through my sort of interactions, people like Matt and various people at the Chico Review, for example, in Montana, and other people I've shown, it's trying to piece those sort of narratives together in a very abstract way that still has the feeling that I want to get across of this, like, as I said, fever dream. But yeah, so that, yeah, it's that constant, it's like it's just a balancing act, really, that I was trying to navigate.
Sounds like you're almost uncomfortable with, or have been uncomfortable with, putting this work out there within the South African photography climate. Was that kind of a natural progression for you to look abroad in terms of where a suitable market might be for your work? I'm not saying South Africa isn't, but if most of the success comes from the kind of documentary and those types of politically charged narratives, then did you feel like you were being pulled elsewhere in that respect?
Yes and no. I think I've always kind of tried to see my work as like an internationally established, or gone down a sort of pathway that leads toward a like sort of more international outlook on things, because it's no secret that if you do well overseas as a South African artist, whether it be photography or the various other sort of practices, that often you get way better received when you kind of come back to South Africa. So that was kind of my thinking. I mean, the sort of publishing landscape here for photography is incredibly tough and almost non-existent, and there's almost like no people doing actual printing of books. It's a very much a dying art here. So that was more, it was more like a practical sort of outlook at things. And then also just wanting the book to live in a landscape that felt like it could live outside of Africa. I mean, South Africa, Africa, and then and more on a global stage, and appear at places like Paris Photo, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. So
Yeah.
that was my sort of thinking. I like to like kind of start outward and then kind of move back towards South Africa, and hopefully it'll get kind of well received here, whether it be now or in years to come. So that's kind of my thinking.
Cool. And just before we kind of move deeper into it, give us an idea of your background and how you got into photography, why photography as a medium, et cetera, et cetera.
So, yeah, I grew up in the leafy suburbs of Cape Town, in the southern, commonly known as the southern suburbs, in an area called Newlands. My parents are both very hardworking individuals. Both had their own sort of, or had a company of their own. So, kind of learned that from a young age in terms of like an entrepreneurial spirit. I went to a very traditional all-boys school called the South African College School, which is the oldest school in the country. Um, got an amazing education there, but it did come with its complexities. I mean, it's very driven by sport and sort of this very sort of masculine outlook on things, which took me a long while to kind of unlearn once I left school, which I'm thankful I did. And I went down that journey of like kind of unpacking that in my 20s and into my 30s. Yeah, and then I started photography quite late. I mean, I think I was 18 when I started photography, on a family trip. Kind of, we went away on a sort of what people call a safari. I guess we call it just going to the bush. But yeah, I just started taking photos there, and it kind of bit. I have an incredibly, I wouldn't say addictive personality, but I get really full on into things, and photography is one of those things that really grabbed me from the beginning, and hasn't let me go. So yeah, and then my girlfriend at the time went and studied photography, and she was kind of relaying back to me that it wasn't something that she would recommend. It was around 2010. I was just out of school, and I went and lived in China, and she was back in South Africa studying photography, and I was in China and kind of developing my eye, as it were. And I found being in China as quite a lonely space. It was such an amazing place to make photographs because I spent hours just walking around. Then I returned to South Africa after that trip, of that year of being away, and decided I would go and study cinematography and directing at a local film school here called AFTA, which was a 3-year degree. So I got a degree in motion picture. And during that time, I was kind of building my portfolio, and was fortunate enough to have friends in the sort of music scene here, and a little bit in sort of advertising and commercial work. And I was already working while I was in college, which was amazing because it built a sort of vocabulary of how things worked in that world. And quite early, I felt like I recognized that, yes, I want to be a sort of art photographer, as it were, and I'd love to make books and be in galleries and so on and so forth. But I also love the sort of challenge of commercial photography and how I can kind of apply my practice, which I see as kind of adjacent to that, to these kind of commercial worlds. So that kind of developed. And then when I left college, I was very lucky to then sign with a local agency here that represented me, and things kind of kicked off from there. And I was lucky to land quite a sizable campaign for a commercial client, which allowed me some sort of capital to then do a trip to the States, as well as Europe. And I signed with an agent in Italy called 2DM. And yeah, then things kind of grew from there, and spent quite a long time kind of just building the commercial side of things, and then slowly realized that I couldn't do that forever, and started then making a lot more personal work, and developing concepts like memory bank and some of the other stuff that I've been doing.
Yeah, it's you definitely have one of the longer commercial and editorial work experience that I've seen in terms of your CV. Certainly, you've been really successful in that side of things, and busy in your 20s, I guess, just going out there and hustling. Has that relative success in the edit? I mean, you've worked with people like not people, brands like Nike, Vogue, Google, etc. You've got some big names under your belt. Has that type of experience changed your relationship with photography, or did it? What type of influence did it have on your personal work, if any? Certainly, when it comes to memory bank.
It's an interesting question, and I think firstly, thank you for noticing that. I have been very fortunate in that regard. I think also geographically, I was able to get a lot of that work because of where I'm based. But I I like to think that it hasn't shaped how I make my personal work. But then I show people work, and they immediately go, "Do you work in the commercial sphere?" So it obviously does. I think I'm so entrenched in it that it's hard for me to recognize that. But it definitely has. I mean, I think it's more just being disciplined, I think. And it's something we can talk about if you'd like in length as we go on. But for a lot of my projects, I set up these lists, especially for Memory Bank. I had all these ideas floating around in my head of how I wanted to kind of tackle this. And I built these lists that I would then tick off week by week. And when I wasn't working commercially, I was doing this work and ticking these lists off as I went. So I think it's more the discipline, and then also be able to shoot as much as you do commercially and kind of building the sort of technical know-how in terms of lighting, exposure, like in my opinion, like even scanning of my negatives has almost become like an art form in itself. The amount of time I've spent behind my scanner because of COVID. During COVID, I scanned my entire archive, so I have it like on file, and that sort of time in the saddle, as it were, has really developed a sort of eye and understanding of how I want the colors to look out of my film, and almost created like a signature, I feel, of how the colors are kind of perceived. So, yeah, I think it all feeds into each other, and I'm very thankful for it, for having both, because it affords me to kind of do both at the same time, and the personal work kind of breeds a sort of uniqueness and sort of niche into the commercial stuff, and vice versa. It kind of the commercial work allows me to fund a lot of the personal work, and allows me to travel and that sort of thing. So I'll always continue to do both, I think, no matter what happens. I mean, I would love to pursue the art side of things a lot more, but it is what it is.
Not enough money in it. Not enough. Not enough
Yeah,
funds.
exactly.
Well, maybe
So
there is if
yeah.
you're top of the tree, if you're an Alex off, maybe. But yeah. Tell me about these lists. I mean, I totally agree with you. I haven't done too much commercial work. I've been privileged myself to not have to necessarily. But I can definitely understand the lessons you learn from a discipline side of things, and that you can bring into your photographic practice. Interesting, like you're talking about lists. Are you talking about lists in terms of photographic setups or locations or idea concepts in terms of what you want to? Because I look at your work and I think, certainly with memory bank, I don't see too much that's contrived. Maybe it is, but it feels a little bit more from shooting from the hip than maybe some of your commercial work. Am I right or wrong in that?
Well, that was the goal, is like creating a perception that was all shot from the hip. And that's where those lists kind of come in. I spend a lot of time when I'm sitting on an airplane, for example. I seem to have all the ideas in the world when I'm sitting on an airplane and can't really do much about anything. So I spend time compiling these lists, and they don't come down to, say, talking about lighting setups or time of day. That comes later, but it's just simple, often very shorthand, like this wall with this concept, this idea, and I have them sitting in my studio at my desk. I look at it every day. I'm working on another book project that I'm actually almost done with, and sits and looks at me every day. And I think as an artist, I don't want to be an artist that talks about all the work that I want to do. I want to just be actively pursuing it, whether it be shooting 10 shots in a week or shooting once a month, at least like you're chipping away. Um, and I think that comes from sort of my family background and just like this notion of like, kind of like you got to get things going if you want to sort of see the fruits of your labor. You can't just talk about it. Talk's cheap. So yeah, that's kind of how I approach things. It's kind of a very sort of regimented way of working, and sometimes the lists get neglected. Life happens, and I look up and I haven't shot for like 2 months, and it's frustrating. But I know it's there, and I know that it's getting tackled. So that's kind of where the lists kind of come in. And Memory Bank is like, as I said, it's in many ways it's a culmination of all these things happening behind the scenes that then hopefully make the image kind of look like it just kind of happened. So there's a lot of that, which is, I'm glad that it feels that way. That's how it's meant to feel.
Yeah, cool. And I'm going to touch upon the sequencing and the nature of the cohesion with the images is later. But as I want to kind of now go into the book in a little bit more detail. Before I do, I'm going to read you one more excerpt that I found very, very interesting again. And I'm not sure if you'll be able to tell me after I read it whether you wrote this before or after the write-up that you sent me. But I'll read it first, and I have many questions that kind of emanate from this. So, Memory Bank is the study of my thoughts, both past and present. It investigates the relationship I have with myself and often with the act of photography. The work even goes as far as exploring various devices used to capture images, both artistically and practically. The focus of the imagery is my constant frustration with the medium of photography. The contrast between spending time at home versus being on the road for work, immediate homesickness, past relationships, heartbreak, traumas, family, mental health, illness, and the repetitive failings of my memory. What can we trust of what has passed, and how helpful is it to our present and ultimately future selves? This distrust is the starting point for the work and has allowed me to explore these themes with the flexibility that I haven't allowed myself before. With this blank slate, I can draw from my archive, recreate scenes from my life, explore collaborations with fellow artists, and even draw inspiration from my dreams. I hope that this becomes my new standard practice moving forward. So the line in there that was really interesting for me was, what can we trust of what has passed, and how helpful is it to our present and ultimately future selves? So you tell me, when was that? When did you write that? Because I know that the work in Memory Bank is over a few years, right? But when did you write that, and has it changed since in terms of this trust and distrust of what has passed, what's real, what's fiction, and looking back on that now?
Yeah, so that was written before the writing that I have now, and I even had a buddy of mine who's a very talented writer also draw up a sort of an introduction to the book, which also didn't work, unfortunately. So it's been a journey. Let's put it that way. But I think that writer, a lot of it is true, and I think it's a lot of how I perceive the sort of body of work. But I also feel like there's a sense that I have all the answers in that write-up, like it or how I hear it. It's like it's got this finality to it. And that's not really how I feel about the work. I'm still figuring out the work. I'm still practicing as a photographer. If I had the answers, then I wouldn't have much to draw from. So I think, yeah, that write-up kind of falls flat in that regard. But I still have a distrust in the whole medium. I think I have a lot of sort of, not distrust, but I would love to be more of a mixed medium sort of artist. I would love to be doing some painting. I would love to be integrating writing into my work more. Not necessarily me doing the writing, but having a sort of more collaborative outlook on things, which I am working on a lot more. And also just bringing photography and the practice of like objects and archive into like a 3-dimensional space is something that more and more sort of interested in people like Terrence Simon and Broomberg and Shannon, who have now split. Like that sort of works under the sort of blanket of photography, but also pushes completely out of it. And I think that for me is really exciting. And it's something that I want to pursue more and more. This new body of work that I'm working on has explorations of like printmaking and that sort of thing outside of photography, using ink and even some AI, and like just playing with what it means to be someone that's very visual and thinking about that. So when I say distrust in photography, that's kind of what I mean. It's not whether if take a photograph of a battle scene is true or not true. It's like I'm not interested in those discussions because I think inherently in its nature, it's hard to, in any medium, cover what is true because it's all about perspectives, I guess. So that's kind of what I mean in that passage of like that distrust. And then talking about memory, it's such a cliche, I feel, but a photographer having a bad memory, it's just one of those things, and something that I really struggle with. So that was kind of the starting point, and I can elaborate if you like about the whole memory thing, but I'll let you ask maybe more questions, and we can kind of get into that as we go.
Tell me about the memory thing. Does that whether you're, because you mentioned also in that pre-write up, I guess, this constant frustration with the medium of photography. Is that what you mean in terms of like the distrust as well? They kind of goes into it, or is there something else that provides this frustration that you get from photography? Because we all feel it. We all feel that like this tangible frustration, just why can't I get the shot that I want? Or why can't I make sense of this work? Or why can't I get success? Or whatever it might be. But do you mean something a little bit more philosophical?
If I'm honest, I think a lot of the frustration I'm also hiding behind there is my frustration with writing about photography. I think writing about photography is something that I really don't feel comfortable about. Like, as I said, if I wanted to be a writer, it's something I would have pursued. And that's why I always try and like pass the buck and try get writers to write about my work. But sometimes that's tough to do. So that's maybe also I'm kind of shielding myself with the use of frustration about photography, but maybe it's also like a shield about not wanting to talk about the work in terms of exactly how I perceive it in my head, because it's not possible for me to kind of outline it in a way that I feel is like neat and tidy and like ticks all the boxes. And that's kind of why I ended on the write-up that I did, because it's like a surrender of like, I actually don't have all the answers, but kind of read into this as you must and hopefully draw something from it that you like, dislike, or anything other. Anything else. I mean, the work's made. I mean, that was the hard part. Now people just need to hopefully just engage with it. So
you're just articulating, every time I go to critique or vice versa, it's just articulating this kind of like cliched elevator pitch, right? With this whatever you're presenting. It's really difficult, because in your head, or maybe you don't know, and you kind of want to feel out. Maybe some people can help you articulate it. It's really difficult, that's not what we want to do. It's like doing the business side of photography. It's like, I don't want to do that. I just want to do the work and I want it to speak for itself. But unfortunately, we don't live in a world of mono, kind of expressions of a certain medium. It's multi-medium, multifaceted medium world. So speaking of elevator pitches, just give me your idea, a very short synopsis of the book in your own mind. And I know you kind of want to let the audience and let people make of it what they want to. And we've touched upon it a little bit, but give me what this book means to you and what your intent with it is.
Now that it's finished, and I mean, it went to print on Friday, it feels just like a journey, like a journey of self-discovery, using a book as therapy in many ways. within my personal life, but in my sort of practice as well. That's the shortest sort of outline of this. The images are just like a byproduct of me kind of delving into ways in which I want to make work, trying things that I wouldn't necessarily try otherwise, and kind of coming to terms with a sort of accountability in my work that I think I sidestepped a lot previously, and I tried these sort of half-hearted approaches towards projects. This one I threw myself fully into it, and yeah, came up with a lot of images that seem all over the place, but through this sort of wading through the sort of bulrushes, I've come to somewhat of a cohesive thought experiment slash fever dream. So yeah, it's really hard. You have to see it to kind of figure it out, but that's kind of how I would describe it, which is not a very good description, but it is what it is.
Well, I cheated. I read your write up before I went through all of the images, so it kind of gave me a little bit of context. But the word I wrote was like a mixtape, like a visual mixtape of what's in your in your mind, and then fever dream, kind of this memory aspect comes into it as well. It's like these little like snippets of your memory, but you can't quite grab onto them. It's like when you wake up from a dream, you're like, what was that dream? It was all over the place, but I can't really like, you know what I mean? And it had this real unsettling feeling to it, but this beautiful, um, emotive kind of cohesion that kind of felt by the time we got to the end. It's like, oh, okay, I need to look through these again, but it's starting to make sense to me because initially, and like you said as well, initially when I first looked through them, it did feel quite scattered. And then your use of color and black and white, as well as the different types of lighting and what you're trying to say. And then I go through it again, like every photo makes sense in the right place. And there's some beautiful sequences that you've put together that's just kind of took me another look. That's because I'm pretty slow, but it definitely made sense. And I love that to it. I love this layered approach where it's like you just drive so much curiosity in the viewer, and this story that you're taking people through, it feels disjointed, but it's not. It's this melee of what's going on in your mind and these struggles that you've had personally, which I presume are the ones that you kind of mentioned in your write-up in terms of homesickness and some mental health issues and loneliness and travel and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, getting onto the sort of memory aspect of things, like we discussed earlier, and something that I want to touch on, it's like this whole book started from about 10, 11 years ago. I got attacked on a commercial shoot in South Africa, and I didn't ever want to bring that up in terms of the write-up and discussing it in terms of in a sort of formal space, because there's enough of that comes out of South Africa, and like sort of work born out of violence. But for me, that day is so important because it's not about the actual occurrence of what happened. It's more how the day in my mind has kind of shifted and warped, and how at the time for the most part, didn't find it quite significant, to be honest. It happened. I was injured. My camera got stolen. It was incredibly traumatic, but at the time, it didn't feel traumatic. And then how these memories and the occurrence of this manifested down the line, and how that day has changed in my head. And in later years, realized that I behave in certain ways in certain situations uh, is because of certain events like that and other things that have happened in my past. So that's what interests me about memory, is just like this. We cling on to memory as if it's our own, but it's actually a collective. It's like a communal thing that happens to us. Like it's your parents telling you about when you were 4 years old and this is what you do, and you hang on to that, and then you have your own memory of that, and then your cousin tells you another memory that's of that time, and it contradicts that. So memory is something that I don't hold on to too dearly, and maybe that's why I have a bad memory, because it's so easily warped and changed. And there's studies on that when people talk about very traumatic events that happen in the world, things like 9/11, for example. I think it actually is called the Mandela effect, ironically, but where you perceive certain memories of a day as one thing, and then they actually proven to be completely wrong. So it's very interesting, and I think that's what a lot of this work's about. There's a very sort of distinctive shot of a gun in the book that's on the cover. That's
Selling that as
in
a
a
print
sort
as
of,
well, right?
yeah, as a print. That picture is so interesting to me because for me it tells everything you need to know about the book in one image. In terms of me explaining it now, is that for the longest time I thought that gun belonged to my uncle who took his own life using that weapon. I then confronted my dad about, not confronted, but had a discussion with my dad about the gun, and it just turned out that that gun was a gun that he inherited from his father, and they weren't linked at all. But as a young child, I had put these memories together and created the scene in my head that was completely untrue. So that's kind of what a lot of the book's kind of playing on is. And then you look at the Ziploc bag, or the sort of vacuum sealed bag in that image is kind of imitating a sort of evidence bag, and the flowers are meant to kind of speak of forgiveness. So it's like thinking of metaphors within some images that are really staged like that. That's something that I created through thinking about these ideas, and then other images that are, like you said, are on the fly and kind of happen kind of organically. So there's playing with these ideas of memory and pain and homesickness, and as we all do, just trying to figure things out, I guess. So yeah.
I love it. I love hearing that story. I don't love kind of the events that you went through with referencing those memories with your images, but that it makes those images now even more interesting. Um, is there any of your memory that you blocked out that you can't remember from childhood onwards?
I don't think voluntarily. I just think it's just like I have this really like a memory like a sieve. So it's not voluntary. Maybe it is, but as I said, I had a very amazing upbringing, a really happy childhood. So, but I definitely do think I struggle with certain mental health issues like depression and sort of like ups and very sort of severe ups and downs and that sort of thing. So that might also be part of sort of memory loss. It's just like this continuous like trauma struggle where your brain's kind of just like in survival mode. Um, so yeah, and I mean, I'm not shy to talk about the fact that I've been going to therapy and kind of unpacking that, which I think has been really incredible for my work as well. So yeah, I think talking about mental health in sort of all facets of life is really important, no matter sort of one circumstance, because I'm sure from the outside, my career and like as you pointed out, like my commercial career looks like this major success, but we all have these ups and downs and struggles, and I think it's important to kind of discuss that within our work, but also just as within a personal sort of aspect, and kind of dealing with that before we get into making these sort of existential bodies of work. I think it's quite important to kind of get to the core of why you're behaving in a certain way. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey so far.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there I want to kind of double click on, but I read a quote from Robert Adams not so long ago about you know creating really powerful and beautiful art is only possible if you truly know yourself. And I think there's a lot to be said in that. There's a lot of facade out there. There's a lot of creating for maybe what you think other people want to see, and it's really difficult to be that vulnerable and be open enough with yourself, let alone with other people, to be able to create from a place of true honesty and authenticity. But in order to do that, you've really got to like understand yourself. So kudos to you for getting therapy and being able to talk about these things. we can be the most successful. I know many classically defined successful people that are extreme depressives, and they there's no causation there, maybe some correlation, but I think it's important to understand the power of that within one's work. So, do you see that as like, so because I've had my own issues, and I figured like when I got a little bit better, would the creative side of me be less good? Do we need a little bit of strife and a little bit of struggle and a little bit of starving artist mindset to create like powerful work? Which is obviously not true, but did you ever have that in you as well? Like, oh, well, I'm going through something difficult and now I can kind of use photography to express that.
I think we've been sort of hypnotized in some way by like a sort of like Keith Richards sort of rock and roll media frenzy, just like this hype that you need to be this like wild person that does all this crazy stuff, and like you need to be involved in drugs and alcohol, and you have to be doing this and hanging out with these certain type of people, and that people are born creative and all of this. It's just like, for me, I'm slowly realizing, and I mean, it's different for everyone, but I feel like for me, that's all complete nonsense. I've also been sober now for almost 5 years, and my work's never been better. Be able to get up early in the morning and not have a hangover and not have the sort of demons of the night before, and be able to sit and look at the lists on my wall and not feel a sense of dread because I'm like, have all of this stuff going in my head, like, has been incredibly beneficial. So I don't know, like, trying to be the best version of yourself, whatever that looks like. If it means going and drinking 15 beers a night, then that's your thing. But like, in my opinion, being healthy and getting into the ocean and doing exercise and trying to be better in your relationships, like, it's only going to be good for making work, because those are the things that are like truly make you a human being. And like, and we always like, I think inherently being a creative allows you to be a certain type of way, and I don't think you need to kind of pile that on with like exterior factors. It's like your personality and way of thinking. So yeah, I don't buy into that whole. I think there's a little bit to be said about like starving artists, maybe, in terms of like, I always think if I had millions of dollars, like, would I still be keen to go and like hang out in a small town in South Africa and make images? But I'm also saying I don't think you need to like, if you can eradicate all the variables in your life that make your life harder, that are easily like dealt with by like going and talking to a friend or a therapist, or getting off drugs and alcohol, or going and exercising more, whatever it may be. If that, yeah, it's just, there's a way to kind of make your life better without feeling like you have to be a certain way as an artist. I think that's complete nonsense.
I feel like there's still a cool or not cool mentality with the art world. It's like, are you cool enough? Like, do you fit the bill in terms of whether it's your, your outward appearance, or whether it's kind of like who you hang around with, or it's your music choice? There's definitely still, maybe it's slightly the slightly younger generation, but I definitely feel that, and that can still pull people in the wrong directions, right? But I totally agree with you. I think one thing I've learned through being as healthy as possible, I still have my demons with sugar and well, basically sugar. Yeah. But when I have I don't drink nearly as much as I used to, and I just think like having clarity of feeling. I think we're trying to create things to evoke some kind of emotions and feeling, not in ourselves as much as other people, right? And just to understand and to be able to articulate in our own brains like what that feeling is and why, and really ask those deeper questions. I don't think you can do that with a muddied brain and with this kind of opaqueness that comes with the midst of depression or other physical health issues or bad habits, whatever it might be. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. But tell me, I want to get a little bit into the book production, and I mean, you called Memory Bank a fever dream, like a trail of consciousness. I think I read that you said, which is such an awesome phrase. So how did you, if it's got this kind of like fever dreamness, if that's a word, kind of approach and concept to the book, where do you even start with what to leave in, what belongs and what didn't? Was this you and the publisher going through all this? And just tell me about the whole kind of curation and sequencing process with the concept that you have with the book.
It's a very good question, because I initially wanted this to be like a super extensive body of work, because I wanted it to feel like an assault almost on sort of like back-to-back pages of just like really thought out imagery that like you think it's gonna stop, it just carries on like getting to you. So I actually took a massive dummy to Chica Review and showed it to a whole bunch of people there, and with my fellow attendees, as well as the people that I kind of met there, the sort of the experts. And they all said the same thing, like, you need to distill this down. Like, people are going to just, it's like you're going to fatigue people. And it's something I really took on, because that's something also that I think the older I get, like, it's something that I'm trying to be better at, is just like sort of eating humble pie and feeling like I don't know, I don't have all the answers. And like, I do get things wrong. And giving a person a book that extensive is almost unfair on the viewer. So I really took that on. And it's obviously hard, because a lot of your pictures feel like your babies, and the images that I feel are strong, other people are just like, this doesn't work as a thing. So to the credit of Tommaso at Witty Books, who we can discuss as well, they're based out of Italy. He was like, send me all the images. I'm going to work through things and I'm going to present them to you, and then we can kind of take it from there. So we did that. And I think there were, I think, up to 8 reviews that we went back and forth, which is a lot, because I feel like I'm quite decisive in terms of my approach to things, which obviously doesn't seem that way with such a long body of work. But he was really incredible in that he like took on my notes and pushed back where he felt it needed, and we've kind of settled on 200 pages, which is still a lot, but the amount of images that have been cut from that is a lot. So yeah, I'm really happy with where it's at, and I don't think I would have got there if it wasn't for him being quite hard on the process. And you kind of need that sometimes. You need that collaboration, and it's been a massive learning curve for me, because yeah, you can get caught up in your own process, and you can become your worst enemy. So yeah, it's been good.
Tell us more about Witty Books then. It's yeah, I'll let you talk about them a little bit, but also your practice of, or the approach to finding a publisher and how that all transpired.
I think Witty Books just kind of appealed to me because it felt so personal. The stuff the work they do feels very personal, and it's not a massive publisher that has like 1 million employees, and it's not like, it doesn't feel like this massive machine. And I think this work is so personal, it kind of needed that personal touch and like a sort of one-on-one care. I think a lot of my other bodies of work maybe I could work with another publisher that's more kind of focused on the sort of maybe the aesthetics of it, or just like kind of how many books are we going to sell, or how many shops are we going to get it into, or so on and so forth. But Tommaso felt very sort of personal, and he felt like he took it on as much as I did. So that's kind of was my thinking. And he was also just really responsive to the work when I sent it to him, and there was a sort of what stood out to me was more concerned about talking about the work than like the sort of practicality of publishing a book, or like how much money can you give me up front, so on and so forth. So there was like a belief in the work before the actual sort of practicality of things, which I really appreciated. Um, and that's kind of why I think we work so well on this, and I'm hoping that we can do some more work down the line, because yeah, it's been an amazing process.
And why now the book? I mean, you obviously had so many images, but was there a seminal moment where you thought, okay, right, I want to publish some of this and I want to make a book? And what was that? And why?
What I've also learned with publishing is you kind of, it happens when it happens. There's no like, I would be lying if it was like, I'm making a decision that I want to release this at Paris Photo on these dates, and like it's been super seamless, and it's taken a while to find a publisher, and it's taken us a while to kind of get the book to where we're happy with it, and then get the right cover design, and back and forth with that, and a difference of opinion on that. Like it's not like we just agree on everything. And I don't think that'd be a good partnership if that was the case. So it's certainly not a conscious decision. It's very much on the guidance of Tommaso and like his outlook on things. And he's just been like, these dates work. He goes to a lot of fairs, and he's like, I think Paris will be very good for this. And I think this is a good for my timeline in terms of doing pre-orders and all the logistics around it. So that's kind of why it's coming out now. It's just been a case of us being patient and crossing our T's and dotting our I's, as it were, to make sure that the book is in a place that it's as good as it's going to get, and get it to the right audience and give it the best chance to kind of get out in the world. So that's kind of our thinking behind it. And he might have other sort of things to add to that, but yeah, that's kind of my sort of perspective on things.
Well, great timing with Paris Photo, which at the time of recording, it's going to be in about 4 weeks' time. So you're planning to launch the book, pre-launch now, and then launch the book at Paris?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to go out there for a few days. I've got a book signing on the 16th. So yeah, it should be good. Just get out there and meet a whole bunch of people, and just hopefully just immerse myself in 3 days of photography, and head back to sunny Cape Town afterwards. So yeah, it should be good.
Nice. Yeah, I wish I was going at the moment. I can't go, but if anything changes, I'll see you there. What is the so you mentioned you're working on another body of work. We always have projects going on, I guess, and don't want you to necessarily tell us about that if you don't want to. But what does kind of that creative recovery look like for you now, after, because you're obviously focusing on Memory Bank and the release, and then what does that transition look like, and what does the future hold for you in that respect?
There's no real transition, because I kind of work on projects in parallel all the time. So I'll have like 3 or 4 or 5 projects going at the same time. And it's just kind of, like I said, when I have time outside of commercial work, or sort of like seasonal stuff in terms of areas that I want to document, so on and so forth. So there's a whole bunch of parameters that I work in. So there's it's not like I'm like taking a break from photography now that Memory Bank's out, and then we'll pick it up. This other project's on the go. It's called Left Out. And in many ways, and this is something that I'm really kind of focused on in terms of my work, is that every body of work that I make moving forward, and every book kind of meshes into each other. Whether it be like a design element on the front of the book, or a geographical place, or like potentially like I Memory Bank, for example, in that story I told you about the gun. I want to make a short film about my cousin and his sort of recollection of that tragic incident with his father, as a kind of abstract short story of how I perceive that day, and his also version of it kind of merging. So that's kind of how it works. So this new body of work, as I said, Left Out, is very list based again, and it's all the work that I've been meaning to do in South Africa for the last, say, 10 years that I haven't got to. And I'm sure we all have a drawer of lists that we've been wanting to get to and we never have. And I was just like, I'm tired of this. So I wrote all of them down. Projects that I was either like, maybe they'll become something in the future, or I'm never going to get to this. It's a silly idea, or it's logistically doesn't make sense, or whatever. Maybe I'm just going to touch on it and I'm going to kind of let it go. And it's once again a form of therapy in many ways of like, I'm going to get to these projects, but I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to dive in like a memory back. So it's a whole bunch of images, kind of, yeah, just giving like a nod to these projects I'm never going to get to, and that's why it's called Left Out. It's like all the stuff that I haven't paid attention to, and I've got probably like five.
What's underpinning, what concept is underpinning it, other than just stuff you left out? But is there a more personal take?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just this frustration of like, why do we like not be able to get to things like we should? Not, we can sit on Instagram for an hour a day, or we can, yeah, just
Go and do
be
shit.
really interested into, yeah, be interested in complete nonsense. And we have all these excuses of why we haven't got to this work. So this is kind of me, like, also once again trying to just find myself accountable and make something from it. So it'll be a very visual book, and it won't have too much text, and I'm thinking about kind of doing it in a way that feels even more like a diary than memory bank, and playing a little bit with the layout. And as I said, there's a painting, there's going to be a sculpture, there's some printmaking, there is some like sort of woodwork sort of stuff, and I hope to make it a book and an exhibition at some point. Yeah, and kind of my sort of introduction into the mixed media world. So that's kind of,
Well, I was going to say, like, some of your images in Memory Bank are images of drawings or images of, you wouldn't put them as like classical photos, right? You can't describe the ones I'm thinking of, but there's some images of other pictures and there's some images of some drawings and stuff. So you're kind of like dipping your toe into that already, right?
yeah, exactly. I think I would love down the line to try even do like a second version of Memory Bank where it leans more into that. Uh, a good example, I don't know if you've seen it, Gathered Leaves by Alex Soth is like a process book that he brought out that I have, and it's just to kind of even show more of the thought process about each image, and like maybe have some more like handwriting and like illustrations and like mapping and stuff. So it's something I'm really interested in, and like archive and using found imagery and that sort of thing. So yeah, I want to lean more into that as more the more I go. But it's also just getting a good balance of how to execute it, because it can be very messy, and you can kind of get lost in it. Yeah.
Yeah. Just adds in a whole other element to cohesiveness and sequencing, I guess. But with Memory Bank specifically, what is it that you, I guess, hope that people feel when they've read through the book and they close that last page? What is your hope for that infusion of some kind of emotion in the viewer?
It's a hard question, because I don't really I, I try not to hold on to that. No, I don't. I just don't hold on to that idea too much, and like I'm not hoping for anything. I'm just satisfied with not even sales. I'm just happy to just go out there and make photographs, and the fact that it's culminated into a book and that people have literally gone out and bought it is good enough for me. What they take from it is their own. It's like me trying to explain how I feel about taking images. It's just it feels futile. The feeling I get in my stomach when I'm standing over my camera and I've seen something in the street that I like, it's pointless trying to explain that. And like for me, holding on to hope that people take something away from the book would be great, and that would be amazing. But I just want them to look at the images, and what they decide is their own sort of business. So
Do
so
you not at
yeah.
least hope for some kind of like inspiration or help? You know, if it can kind of provide a little bit of an inspiring springboard to someone's own journey? Surely that has to come into it.
Yeah, I mean, if it makes people go make more photographs, that'd be amazing, or make more art, or go see a therapist, or I don't know, cut sugar out their diets. I don't know, like, yeah, that'd be great.
At least
But
question some things.
yeah, question something. But I want it to be a personal sort of trip of self-discovery that I hope they don't, yeah, that they keep kind of dear to themselves and not kind of put it out in the world and discuss it with other people. It just needs to be this like intimate look at oneself, I guess. Because that's how I feel about the work. Like, even though I'm putting it out and being vulnerable and all of that, the real true feeling is you can't describe. So
Love it. I'm going to end with a question. I is really, really stupid and silly, and I've asked it so many times. But for you, who's out there in the commercial world a lot, I want to hear your thoughts on AI. Right? How do you feel about the evolution of photography in the current age of AI? Is moving so fast, but specifically with the impact AI is going to have, if anything, on your type of work in the commercial sector over the next few years?
it's a good question, because depending on how you answer this, you might look incredibly silly in like 6
Yeah,
months
yeah.
to 5 years, or you might look like you can see into the future. I mean, it would be silly to say that I wasn't a bit fearful of it all, because I think we all have a certain itch in the back of our heads that's like saying like, wow, like this could completely change the landscape of how I survive in terms of making money and like my financial standings in the world. But I think at the same time, like photography, and this is something that I think young photographers really need to hear, and it's something that I feel like I've got to the point where I discuss it quite openly. It's like, if you want to do photography, you got to be ready to like get in the trenches, unless you've like got a trust fund or your family's very connected in the advertising world. Like, it's going to be a struggle, and it's whether AI is there or not. Like, it's hard and it's not easy, and like you out there and you have to put yourself out there and you have to be willing to take on rejection. And I think AI is just another thing to add to that. Um, my feelings towards AI, I think at the end of the day, it is just going to be part of our tool set, I think, in many ways. Um, and if it takes all of our jobs, then it takes all of our jobs. Like, you're going to have to be adaptive anyway. Like, in the next 10 years, I'm going to be 45 years old. Like, you're going to have to adapt to be able to get clients in a younger space anyway. So whether you adapt to potentially getting another job or adapt to becoming a photographer that people still want to hire, it's still like you're still adapting. So that's kind of how I see it.
Do you see the brands that you're working with at the moment moving or looking at moving in that direction? AI image generation?
100%. I mean, I worked with a guy whose name I won't mention, or his company. I mean, it's a massive, massive brand. He's heading up. He moved from the division that he was working at when I worked with him to a new division that's developing AI technology solely for the use in the creative space. But at the same time, I I like to think, and this is where the trap comes of this question. It's like, I like to think that my work is quite different to what like people are trying to use AI for. I think potentially people that are doing e-commerce work or product photography, I think those people are in potentially a lot of trouble. Or like very sort of maybe more mundane photography, where it's very much about like functionality. It's like, we are trying to sell, I don't know, water glasses. It's like, you need to just photograph this. Like that I think those jobs are going to be, but like the more motor stuff that I feel like I create, it's going to take a little bit of time. And I think the people wanting to create that work are more interested in the arts and working with artists, not necessarily photographers, but they still want that ecosystem to exist. So yeah, I think there'll just be two different camps that are working two different things. And yeah, the audience at the end of the day will be the ones that decide on that, you know what I mean?
But yeah, well, let's hope your memory bank doesn't become a memory bank of actual real images that still exist today. So thank you so much for talking with me. I wish you the best of luck with the book. Just give us all an insight as to where people can find you, where people can buy the book. I think we've talked about it already, but just to cap it off, give us some links.
Cool. So it's kentandreasen.com is my website. It's got everything you need to know there. Then I am on Instagram for my sins at kentandreasen. And then you can buy the book at wittybooks.com. Just go check out their titles there. You can pre-order it, as well as get a pre-order and a print, and get a selection of 3 different prints to your liking. And then I will be at Paris Photo from the 13th to the 16th of November. If this comes out in time, come and say hello and get your book signed. There'll be copies on sale there. Other than that, a quick ChatGPT or Google search will find me.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll put all these links in the descriptions anyway, so people can find you without any issues at all.
And Matt, thanks so much to you for just the time and the insights and doing your research and asking all the easy and the tough questions. It's really appreciated.
No, not at all. It was an absolute pleasure I can't wait to get my copy of the book, which if I don't make it to Paris, I will have it before then, I hope. And actually, no, when are the pre-launch versions coming out? When do we actually get the physical copies? After Paris?
After Paris. Once that launch has happened, then the distribution will start.
Okay, cool. We're going to try and get this out. I'm not sure when people are going to be listening to this, but it'll be around that time, if not towards the end of November, sometime in the kind of second half of November for sure. So
cool.
Thanks again.
Sounds good.
Thanks for your time. Wish you the best of luck. Safe travels. Incredible work. Very inspirational, even though that may not be a hope for you. It's certainly something that I took from your work and continue to do so. So thanks so much for your time, Ken.
Thanks so much. Take it easy.